The Hollywood icon sat in his usual corner booth at a bustling diner, his striking presence impossible to ignore. The air was filled with clinking cutlery and chatter, but his attention was drawn to the smallest figure in the room, a trembling 5-year-old boy. The child hesitated near his booth, his tiny fists clenched by his sides. The icon leaned forward, his chiseled features softening with a warm smile. The boy took a deep breath and whispered, "He hurt Mommy really bad today." The icon froze. The words hit him like a punch, draining the color from his face. He glanced around the diner, scanning for signs of danger. The boy's fear was palpable, his wide eyes pleading for help. Without hesitation, the icon reached for his phone, dialing 911. His deep, calm voice described the situation with the precision of a seasoned action hero. The diner's hum dulled to silence as diners noticed the icon's alarm. A waitress stopped mid-step, her brow furrowing as she caught his gaze. "Stay near the door," he mouthed silently. She nodded, moving swiftly. He turned back to the boy, his large, reassuring hand resting gently on the table. "You're safe now," he said softly, his voice steady despite the storm of thoughts in his mind. The boy's trembling eased slightly, but the weight of his whispered words hung heavily in the air, setting the stage for the events about to unfold. The diner bustled with life, a symphony of clinking plates and cheerful conversation filling the air. Waitresses weaved through the crowded tables, balancing trays of food while regulars exchanged pleasantries. The Hollywood icon sat quietly in his usual booth, his striking features and relaxed demeanor making him a magnetic presence. Though a globally recognized star, he found comfort in the anonymity of the diner's warm atmosphere. Across the room, a sharply dressed man in a tailored suit barked into his phone. His words were curt and biting, his tone leaving little room for argument. The Rolex on his wrist glinted in the light as he gestured emphatically, his frustration directed at whoever was on the other end of the line. Opposite him sat a small boy, no older than 5. The child's demeanor was unsettlingly quiet. He sat motionless, his small hands folded neatly in his lap. His dark eyes flicked nervously between his father and the other diners, as if gauging whether anyone might notice him. His Spider-Man t-shirt, once vibrant, was faded and worn. The icon's attention was drawn to the boy. Something about the child's stillness, the way his shoulders hunched inward as though bracing for impact, stirred unease in him. He shifted slightly, his keen eyes narrowing as he observed the table. The boy reached for a glass of water with trembling fingers, his gaze darting quickly to his father before retreating again. The man's voice grew louder. "I told you, it's your incompetence, not mine. Do I have to handle everything myself?" His words cut through the din like a blade. Patrons at nearby tables exchanged uneasy glances. The icon noticed the waitress, Rose, watching the scene from the counter. She caught his eye and gave a slight nod, her expression one of shared concern. She had seen enough to know something wasn't right. The man slammed his phone down on the table, causing the boy to flinch visibly. "What are you looking at?" he snapped, though it wasn't clear whether the question was directed at the child or the world around him. The boy shrank further into himself, his small frame almost vanishing against the seat's backrest. The icon's jaw tightened. His instincts, honed by years of advocacy and humanitarian work, told him there was more to this than met the eye. The atmosphere in the diner shifted. Conversations dulled as patrons sensed the tension emanating from the table. Then slowly the boy slid off his seat. His tiny legs wobbled as he took hesitant steps across the room. The icon leaned forward slightly, his heart quickening as the boy approached. The child's small frame trembled, his eyes wide with fear. The diner seemed to hold its breath as the boy stopped in front of the icon's booth. The boy stood in front of the Hollywood icon, his small hands clenched into fists at his sides. His dark eyes, filled with a mixture of fear and determination, locked briefly with the icon's piercing gaze. The room around them seemed to blur into the background as the icon leaned forward, lowering himself to meet the boy's height as much as he could. "What's wrong, buddy?" the icon asked, his deep voice softened to a gentle rumble. The child hesitated, glancing nervously over his shoulder toward the man in the suit. The man was engrossed in his phone call again, oblivious to the boy's absence. The boy took a shaky breath and stepped closer. Standing on tiptoes, he leaned in toward the icon and whispered, "He hurt Mommy really bad today." The icon froze, his mind racing to process the words. His calm exterior belied the surge of emotions within, anger, concern, and a growing sense of urgency. His instincts kicked in immediately. He glanced toward Rose, who was still watching from the counter. Catching her eye, he gestured subtly toward the door, signaling her to stay nearby. She nodded in silent understanding and moved closer, her protective instincts sharpening her focus. "Does she need help now?" the icon asked the boy, keeping his voice steady. The boy nodded, tears brimming in his wide eyes. The icon's large hand rested lightly on the table, a reassuring presence for the child. He pulled his phone from his pocket and dialed 911, his movements deliberate and calm to avoid startling the boy further. "This is the Hollywood Icon. I'm at Mac's Diner in Los Angeles. There's a child here reporting a domestic violence situation," he said in a low but firm voice. He gave a brief description of the man in the suit and emphasized the need for immediate assistance. As the icon spoke, the boy flinched at the sound of his father slamming his phone onto the table again. The man looked around, his gaze narrowing when he noticed his son was no longer seated. His expression shifted from irritation to suspicion as his eyes landed on the icon's booth. The child shrank closer to the icon, his small hand reaching out to grip the edge of the table. The icon glanced at the boy, offering a small nod of reassurance. He ended the call and placed his phone back in his pocket, his body positioning slightly to shield the boy from view. The man rose from his seat, adjusting his tie as he approached. His demeanor was suddenly calm, almost unnervingly so. "Hey, champ," he called out, his voice oozing fake warmth. "Let's not bother Mr. Icon. Come on back now." The boy didn't move, his fingers tightening their grip on the table's edge. The icon sat upright, his presence an unspoken challenge to the man. "He's fine where he is," the icon said evenly, his tone carrying a quiet authority. The tension in the diner thickened as other patrons began to notice the interaction. Eyes shifted from the man to the icon, then back again. A storm was brewing, and everyone could feel it. Marcus stopped a few feet from the Hollywood Icon's booth, his face attempting a polite smile, though his eyes betrayed his irritation. He extended a hand toward the boy, his tone smooth but forced. "Come on, sport. Let's not make a scene." The boy didn't move, his small frame pressed tightly against the booth as if seeking refuge. The icon leaned back slightly in his seat, folding his arms across his chest in a way that seemed casual, but was clearly deliberate. "He's staying here," the icon said firmly, his deep voice leaving no room for argument. The diner grew eerily quiet. Forks paused midair. Conversation stopped, and all eyes turned to the unfolding confrontation. Marcus's carefully curated facade began to slip. "I don't think you understand," Marcus said, his tone sharpening. "This is my son. I don't need your interference." The icon stood slowly, his towering frame casting a shadow over Marcus. "And I don't think you understand," he replied, his voice low but unwavering. "This boy just told me something that makes it my business." Marcus's polite mask cracked. His eyes darted around the room, realizing the diners were all watching. He forced another smile, his voice turning saccharine. "We'll handle this at home. Isn't that right, buddy?" The boy shook his head, his small voice trembling. "I don't want to go with you." The crack in Marcus's demeanor widened, his anger bubbling just beneath the surface. "You're causing a scene," he hissed through gritted teeth, his calm slipping further. Before Marcus could step closer, the bell above the diner's door jingled, and two police officers entered. Their uniforms stood out starkly against the diner's warm tones, their presence immediately commanding attention. Marcus turned to see them approaching, and for a brief moment, panic flashed across his face. "Officers, there must be some mistake," Marcus began, his voice shifting to a rehearsed charm. "I was just coming to get my son. I'm sure Mr. Icon misunderstood something." One of the officers nodded politely but didn't stop moving forward. "Sir, we need you to step aside while we speak with the child," she said firmly. Marcus's composure finally shattered. His polite smile twisted into a snarl as he turned back toward the booth. "This is ridiculous. I'm a senior partner at Hadfield Thompson. Do you even know who I am?" The icon moved subtly to shield the boy further as Marcus's anger erupted. His voice rose, his words becoming more erratic. "You have no right to interfere in my family. I'll have your badges for this." The officers remained calm, one stepping closer to Marcus. "Sir, we're going to need you to calm down and cooperate," the officer said. But Marcus wasn't listening. He lunged toward the boy, his hand outstretched, but before he could reach him, the icon's massive arm came between them. "You're done," the icon said, his voice as solid as a brick wall. The officers moved quickly, grabbing Marcus and pulling his hands behind his back. He struggled, shouting obscenities as they restrained him. His carefully styled hair fell into his face, and his expensive suit crumpled as he writhed against the handcuffs. The boy clung to the icon's leg, tears streaming down his face. The icon bent down, placing a gentle hand on the child's shoulder. "You're safe now," he said softly. The officers led Marcus toward the door, his protests fading into the distance. The tension in the diner began to ease, replaced by a heavy silence, as the reality of the situation sank in. As the police officers escorted Marcus out of the diner, the Hollywood icon knelt to meet the boy's eye level. "Can you tell me what happened, buddy?" he asked gently, his voice calm despite the storm of emotions within him. The boy hesitated, glancing nervously at the door where Marcus had disappeared. Finally, he whispered, "He hurt Mommy. She fell down the stairs and she's not moving." The icon's stomach tightened. He placed a reassuring hand on the boy's shoulder and looked toward one of the officers. "You need to send someone to their house now. The mom's in trouble," he said urgently. The officer nodded and stepped aside to radio for additional units and paramedics. The icon stayed with the boy, his protective presence steady and grounding. "Do you know where you live, kiddo?" the icon asked softly. The boy nodded, tears streaming down his face. "It's close, just a few blocks." The officer returned, kneeling beside the icon. "Can you show us where your house is, champ?" she asked, her tone warm and reassuring. The boy nodded again, his small hand clutching the icon's. The group moved swiftly, the officers guiding the boy outside and into their patrol car. The icon followed closely, his presence a silent promise to protect the child. Minutes later, they arrived at the house. The scene was haunting. The front door was slightly ajar, and the silence inside was deafening. The officers entered cautiously, weapons drawn, as the icon and the boy waited outside. The first officer's voice came through the radio. "We have a victim, female, unconscious at the bottom of the stairs, head injury and possible internal trauma. Send paramedics immediately." The boy whimpered, gripping the icon's hand tighter. The icon knelt again, keeping his voice steady. "They're helping her, buddy. She's going to be okay." Paramedics arrived moments later, rushing into the house with their equipment. Inside, they found Sarah, the boy's mother, lying at the foot of the staircase. Blood stained the hardwood floor, and a shattered picture frame lay nearby. "She has a pulse, but it's weak," one paramedic reported. They worked quickly, stabilizing her before transferring her to a stretcher. As they wheeled her out, the icon gently guided the boy forward. "That's your mom, right?" the icon asked softly. The boy nodded, tears spilling down his cheeks. He reached out, his small fingers brushing against his mother's hand as she was lifted into the ambulance. The officers searched Marcus's car, parked outside the house. Inside, they discovered fake passports, a large sum of cash, and incriminating documents detailing years of financial fraud at his law firm. "This guy was planning to run," one officer muttered, shaking his head. Back at the diner, news of the incident had spread. The icon returned with the boy, ensuring he wasn't alone while waiting for updates on his mother. Rose, the waitress, brought over a cup of hot cocoa, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "You're one brave little guy," she said, her voice wavering. The boy managed a small smile, his hands cradling the warm mug. Later that evening, the icon received an update from the hospital. Sarah was stable but would require surgery to address her injuries. "She's lucky help arrived when it did," the doctor said. The icon relayed the news to the boy, who visibly relaxed for the first time. "She's going to be okay thanks to you," the icon said, his voice filled with warmth and pride. The boy looked up at the icon, his expression filled with gratitude. "Thanks to you, too," he said softly. As the boy leaned into the icon's side, the weight of the day seemed to lift slightly. The worst was over, But the story was far from finished. The next few days unfolded like a whirlwind. Sarah, stabilized at the hospital, began her long road to recovery. Her injuries were severe, a concussion, bruised ribs, and a fractured wrist. But the doctors assured her she would heal. By her bedside, Kevin clung to her hand, his small presence a constant reminder of the strength she needed to summon. While Sarah rested, the police worked to piece together the full extent of Marcus's crimes. The evidence found in his car was damning, but it was only the tip of the iceberg. Investigators uncovered bank records, fraudulent accounts, and a trail of financial misdeeds at his law firm. His embezzlement stretched back years, amounting to millions. But the most shocking revelations came from Sarah herself. As she regained her strength, she began to share her story. Her life with Marcus had once seemed like a dream. He was charming, successful, and devoted, or so she thought. After Kevin's birth, cracks began to form. Marcus started staying late at work, missing family dinners, and growing more distant. At first, Sarah dismissed it as stress from his demanding job. But soon the signs became impossible to ignore. Marcus's charm, which once drew people to him, began to feel like a weapon. Sarah discovered hidden transactions in their joint accounts, large sums disappearing without explanation. When she confronted him, he became defensive, his excuses growing more elaborate with each passing month. The breaking point came when Sarah accidentally discovered messages on Marcus's iPad. He had forgotten to disable the synchronization with their shared cloud account. The messages revealed a 2-year affair with one of his junior associates, Jessica Wong. The text painted a picture of secret getaways, expensive gifts, and trips financed with stolen money. Confronting Marcus about the affair was like lighting a fuse. His response was cold and calculated. Instead of apologizing, he turned the blame onto Sarah, accusing her of being too demanding and neglectful. When she pressed him further, his anger boiled over into violence. He grabbed her arm hard enough to leave bruises, his voice sharp and menacing. "If you ever try to leave me or expose me, I'll ruin you. I'll take Kevin and make sure you never see him again," he had threatened. Terrified but determined, Sarah began to plan. She documented everything: the bruises, the threats, the discrepancies in their finances. She took photos, saved text messages, and confided in trusted friends who could later testify. She even reached out to a domestic violence advocate who helped her prepare for what was to come. When Sarah filed for divorce, Marcus responded with the full force of his legal expertise. He painted her as an unstable mother, fabricating evidence of a drinking problem and calling in favors from influential friends. The courtroom battle that followed was brutal, each hearing a test of Sarah's resilience. But Sarah was ready. With the help of her advocate and support of colleagues, she dismantled Marcus's lies one by one. The evidence she had gathered proved not only his abusive behavior, but also his financial crimes. After a year-long legal battle, the judge awarded Sarah full custody of Kevin. Marcus was granted only supervised visitation and ordered to attend anger management counseling. Though the victory was hard-won, it was far from the end of Marcus's attempts to control her. On the day of the incident at the diner, Marcus had shown up unannounced, demanding to see Kevin. When Sarah reminded him that he had lost his visitation rights, he flew into a rage. The argument escalated until he pushed her down the stairs in a fit of anger. Then, he grabbed Kevin and fled, planning to leave the country with fake passports. The events that followed, sparked by Kevin's bravery and the Hollywood icon's intervention, had saved Sarah's life. Now as she lay in her hospital bed, she couldn't help but marvel at her son's courage. "You were my hero," she whispered to Kevin, her voice trembling with emotion. Kevin smiled shyly, gripping her hand tighter. "I knew you needed help," he said simply. The days following Marcus's arrest were a whirlwind of legal proceedings, medical updates, and emotional recovery. Marcus faced a slew of charges, including domestic violence, child endangerment, and financial fraud. His once impressive legal career crumbled under the weight of his crimes. The media coverage of his arrest and subsequent court appearances turned him into a cautionary tale, a man who sacrificed everything for greed and control. Meanwhile, Sarah focused on rebuilding her life. With Kevin by her side, she found strength in their small but resilient family. Her recovery was slow but steady. Each step she took reminded her of the courage it took to leave a toxic marriage and fight for her son. The Hollywood icon stayed involved, his connection to the boy and his mother growing deeper with each passing day. He visited Sarah at the hospital, bringing Kevin along whenever possible. His towering presence filled the room with warmth, and his gentle encouragement helped both mother and son heal from their ordeal. "You're stronger than you know," the icon told Sarah during one visit. "And Kevin? He's one of the bravest kids I've ever met." Kevin beamed at the compliment, his confidence growing in the safety of his new reality. As Marcus's legal troubles unfolded, more evidence of his wrongdoings came to light. Investigators uncovered an elaborate web of embezzlement that had drained millions from his firm's accounts. Former colleagues testified about his volatile behavior and mounting desperation as his double life unraveled. In court, Marcus's defense crumbled. His attempts to manipulate the system were no match for the mountain of evidence Sarah and her team had compiled. The judge sentenced him to a lengthy prison term, ensuring he would no longer pose a threat to Sarah or Kevin. The community rallied around Sarah and Kevin, inspired by their courage and resilience. The icon, ever the philanthropist, took his involvement one step further. He established a foundation dedicated to supporting families affected by domestic violence. The foundation provided resources, legal assistance, and shelter for those in need, ensuring that no one would have to face such challenges alone. 3 months later, Kevin stood proudly on a small stage at a community event, clutching a plaque that read Young Hero Award. The ceremony was organized by the local police department to honor his bravery. The icon stood beside him, towering over the crowd but blending seamlessly into the moment. Sarah watched from the front row, tears streaming down her face as her son accepted the award. "I just wanted to help my mom," Kevin said into the microphone, his voice steady and clear. "And the Hollywood icon helped me. He's my superhero." The audience erupted into applause, moved by the boy's simple yet profound words. After the ceremony, Kevin approached the icon with a hand-drawn picture. It depicted a tiny Spider-Man holding hands with a towering superhero wearing a sleek suit. Beneath it, in careful letters, Kevin had written, "My two heroes." The icon knelt to accept the drawing, his eyes glistening with emotion. "This is going on my wall," he said, ruffling Kevin's hair. "Thank you, buddy." The moment symbolized not just the bond between the global star and the brave little boy, but also the power of courage, compassion, and community to overcome even the darkest circumstances. Mac's Diner became more than just a local eatery that day. It turned into a symbol of resilience, courage, and the unexpected power of human connection. The story of what happened between a globally recognized Hollywood star and a frightened little boy spread far and wide, inspiring countless people to reflect on their own ability to make a difference. The Hollywood icon often revisited the moment in his mind, the weight of the boy's whispered words still fresh in his memory. "He hurt mommy really bad today." Those 6 words had set into motion a chain of events that saved lives, exposed the truth, and ignited change. True to his word, the icon displayed Kevin's hand-drawn picture in a prominent spot in his home. It was a daily reminder of the bravery it took for a child to speak up in the face of fear and the responsibility we all share to protect those who cannot protect themselves. The story also sparked larger conversations about domestic violence. Within professional circles, particularly law firms like the one where Marcus once worked, initiatives were launched to improve support systems and reporting mechanisms. The case shone a light on the silent struggles many face, leading to changes in workplace policies and increased awareness. For Sarah, the journey was far from over, but it was filled with hope. She returned to her career in law, this time specializing in family law and advocating for survivors of domestic abuse. Her personal experience gave her an unparalleled empathy and determination to help others navigate the complex legal system and find safety. Kevin thrived under her care, his spirit resilient despite the trauma he had endured. His bravery became a source of pride, not only for his mother, but for the entire community. He found joy in simple things again, playing basketball with the icon, enjoying ice cream at the diner, and even wearing a new Spider-Man t-shirt that became a symbol of his courage. The incident left an indelible mark on everyone involved. Rose, the waitress who had quietly played her part, became an advocate herself, organizing fundraisers to support the icon's foundation. The diners who had witnessed the events that day often spoke about the life-changing power of a single act of kindness. As for Marcus, his story served as a cautionary tale. Stripped of his wealth, power, and reputation, he faced years behind bars to reflect on the choices that had led him there. His attempts to control and manipulate had ultimately been his downfall. Months later, the icon spoke about the event during a live broadcast. Sometimes being a hero doesn't mean wearing a cape or being in an action movie. Sometimes it's about listening, stepping in when you're needed, and doing what's right, no matter how big or small the action may seem. The story ended as it began, with courage. A little boy had spoken up, a towering Hollywood star had acted, and a community had rallied. Together, they had turned what could have been a tragedy into a tale of triumph. The final lesson was clear. Heroes come in all shapes and sizes. Whether it's a Hollywood icon using his platform for good or a 5-year-old boy finding the strength to whisper for help, every action matters. As Kevin once said, the Hollywood icon saved us. He's like a real superhero, and maybe, if we all try, we can be heroes too.